understand you've had some sessions around emotional well-being, so we're going to look at the link between food and mood and how the two sort of interact with each other. And then with the holiday season coming up, a few little tips for holiday eating. So I really don't want you to feel guilty about any of your food choices. There are no right or wrong foods, but we want to try and eat the better things most of the time and make sure that we're nourishing our bodies best we can. So what is nutrition? Nutrition is the science of food and its interaction with an organism to promote and maintain health. So some of you might be sitting there with specific medical conditions which respond really well to dietary changes. Others of you may have very low risk factors for dietary problems, and you might be looking more at promoting well-being, maybe promoting sports performance, that type of thing. So what we can see with this picture here, this is what a dietitian thinks about. And this image was produced by the Dietitians Association of South Africa. So as we go around, you can just sort of think about how these elements are relevant to you as an individual. So how old are you, for example? We know that youngsters growing up, they need different nutritional needs to adults. And then as you get into older age, it changes again. A good information fact here is particularly related to bone health. So for example, up until the age of 30, your bones can get stronger. So it's really important that you maximize your bone health until the age of 30, because unfortunately after that it's downhill and your bones become weaker. It's very hard to strengthen them up. So physical activity and plenty of calcium and vitamin D are going to be really key. Looking at the next image there, we've got body image. How do you feel about your body? And this is very different for different people. It might be influenced by your upbringing, by your culture, as to what you feel is an appropriate body size for you, how you would like to look, and how you feel comfortable in your own skin. And that's absolutely fine. You must make sure you do the right thing for you. Activity levels, are you active? Do you need to increase your energy intake in order to meet some activities that you're doing and sports performance? How does your work pattern influence your diet? And I'm wondering how you guys have managed with a bit more working from home and having access to that kitchen all day long. Do you find yourself snacking more if you're working from home or less? Something to just sort of bear in mind how that work pattern influences. Food and nutrients, what are your likes and dislikes? How available is food to you? Do you go to the shops in your own car? Do you catch a taxi? Does carrying that food home make a difference? Do you shop several times a week and can get fresh produce? Or do you tend to shop more once a month and then find you're running out of those fresh foods towards the end of the month? And bearing in mind there's no right or wrong, you're going to just try and work with your particular scenario. Culture, religious beliefs are really important. Are you somebody who fasts at certain times during the week or certain times during the year? And you can work around that with your nutrition. What are your tastes, your eating habits, your medical conditions, any medication you take? So just, you might want to write a few notes afterwards and reflect on your own needs and think about how your current situation is influencing your food choices that you're making. So I'm going to image up on the screen now. I'm hoping you can all hear me and see the slides okay. If you can't, just pop a note in the chat box. There were a couple of problems yesterday with the sound, so hopefully you're all with me still. So the South African Food-Based Dietary Guidelines is a general population-based dietary guideline, which is recommending how most of us should be choosing our food. Obviously, there's different specific diets which might tweak it slightly, but the majority of diets do fit into this model. We can see in the middle of the diagram, we've got our starchy carbohydrate foods. So that's things like rice, bread, pasta, potatoes, mealie meal, breakfast cereals. And for the majority of us will find this is where we get about half of our energy intake from these foods. They're also a really great source of fiber and B vitamins, help to keep us regular and also feed those friendly bacteria in our gut as well. Then we've got our fruits and vegetables, which is another large section there. Trying to eat a rainbow, lots of different colored fruits and veg are going to give us different nutrients. We're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail later. Our main protein providing foods, so our building blocks for muscle and also for growth and repair, so recovering from sickness. And again, if you're sporty, repairing those muscles. We've got things like meats and fish, eggs, cheese. Your dairy produce might also be a good source of protein for you, and that's also going to be a key source of calcium. Then your beans, peas, lentils, these could be dried or tinned. Really important source of soluble fiber, and we'll talk about that in relation to cholesterol as well. And the recommended amount is to try and have at least 2 servings a day of your, 2 servings a week of your beans and lentils. They've shown particularly good health benefits. And a lot of the information we find around diet comes from population studies looking at population groups who have particularly good longevity with low disease rates. So for example, there's a specific village in Sicily where they've got one of the highest amounts of centenarians. And if we look at that Mediterranean type eating pattern, we do find those people have particularly good health. They have very low rates of heart disease and diabetes. And so we're looking at the Mediterranean diet being your whole grains, lots of fresh fruits and vegetables, your beans and lentils, small amounts of animal products, and then your really good oils. So at the bottom there, we've got peanut butter, we've got oil, we've got cheese, and again, we'll talk about those in a bit more detail too. So in that picture, they've come up with 11 key statements, which is going to help interpret that picture for you. You might well have seen the American model, which is that pyramid shape. You could also have seen the English plate model. However, they don't have these statements attached to them. And it was found in research that these particularly help people to understand where they should be going. So number one, really important, enjoy a variety of foods. So some people will talk about certain foods as having superfood properties. And really, every food does have its own superfood property, especially if it's a fresh ingredient. So getting a variety of different colors and types of foods is going to mean that you're getting all the vitamins and minerals, but also there's lots of other nutrients within foods, things called flavonoids and polyphenols, different antioxidants which have heart protective properties, cancer protective properties. So we want to try and get a lot of different things. Number two is being active. I know that your T4U program, you've got those that activity support built in at work. Really good to engage in this. And whether you do formal activity or it's more something at home, it doesn't really matter. But you want to try and do about 30 minutes 5 times a week. So activity could be something like going out in the garden, doing some gardening, mowing the lawn. It might be putting some music on when you're doing the cleaning at home and just trying to work up a bit more of a sweat. If you've got a family, having a dance session Friday evening after school, get everyone moving. So activity can be anything, and the key thing is to try and find activity which naturally fits within your week. If you need to go out and do something extra regularly, you might struggle. And even small things like taking the stairs instead of the lift, parking a little bit further away at the supermarket to make yourself walk, going for a walk around the block, it can add up. So ideally 30 minutes in one straight stretch is better for your heart health. But if you're struggling with that, you can break it up into several blocks. 10 minutes before work, 10 minutes at lunch break, 10 minutes in the evening would be much better than not doing anything at all. So number 3, make starchy foods part of most meals. You don't have to include a starchy food with all your meals, but they are a really good energy source. With the Banting-Atkins diet being quite popular in recent years, a lot of people have reduced their starchy foods. Not a problem at all, as long as you are including some whole grains on a maintenance phase. So that was one question that came up yesterday around Banting diets and how that fits in. You want to think about your sort of active weight loss phase on a diet like that, and your maintenance phase. And you do want to try and include some whole grains, some oats, your beans and lentils, which have got starch in them as well. Eat plenty of fruits and vegetables every day. We're really aiming for 5 a day as an absolute minimum. If anyone listening in has got diabetes or struggles with their sugar levels, then usually I'd recommend going for a maximum of 2 fruits in a day and then 3 or more vegetables. You've got your dry beans, split peas, lentils, and soya. Milk, moss, or yogurt you can have every day. Fish, chicken, lean meat, or eggs can be eaten daily. It doesn't have to be, so that key word there, can be. is really important. It can be healthy to have those foods every day, those protein-rich foods, but you don't have to if it's something that doesn't fit within your culture and your food choices. Not a problem at all. Drink lots of clean, safe water. So keeping hydrated, really important. We don't necessarily have to have just plain water though. So you can count things like yogurt, milk, juice, your tea and coffee towards your fluid intake as well. Use fats sparingly and choosing oils rather than the hard fats. Use sugar in foods and drinks high in sugar sparingly, and also salt, using salt and high salt products sparingly. Now, I understand you've had a wellness event quite recently, so it's quite likely you'll have done your cholesterol and your blood pressure at that event. If you did find that you've got a tendency for higher blood pressure, then salt is going to be a really key thing to focus on within your diet. Salt does increase the fluid retention within your body, and this in turn increases your blood pressure. So we want to be careful with salt, and my recommendation for you would be to try not to add extra salt to your food at the table. Much easier to add a little bit when you're cooking and then taste the food and get the amount right. When we start with that salt shaker at the table, we tend to put more on than we realize, and it's much easier to end up with too much. So your salt recommendation is no more than 5 grams a day, ideally. And we get about 2/3 of our salt within foods already. So things like cheese, even everyday foods like bread is quite high in salt. And then your processed meats are another key area. So sausages, polony, dried meats, that type of thing is often going to be high in salt. Okay, so let's have a look at some fats. I'm just wondering if we could get a show of hands if people would like to share if they've ever had a high cholesterol at all. Rosita, are you still with us there?
Absolutely. I haven't seen any hands so far.
No hands so far. In my experience, cholesterol is often one of the most common things from a wellness day that comes out.
So there you go. Sorry, Lillian has just put up a hand in response to your question. So yeah.
Well done for being brave there, Lillian.
And Ben.
There's some other people hiding in the background. So when we're thinking about cholesterol, we want to think about fat in 2 different ways. So you've got your blood fats, with the fat circulating in your blood, which we can monitor with a finger prick test or a blood test. Usually at a wellness event, it'll be a total cholesterol that they'll check for you. And we really want it to ideally be less than 5. And then within that total cholesterol, we can break it down into different types of fat. So your LDL cholesterol, your low density lipoproteins, these are the ones that tend to deposit on our arteries and make our arteries narrower. So we want to try and have a low number of this one. Your HDL, your high density lipoproteins, these can help to clean your arteries and takes the fat back to your liver. So this is a really good one to have lots of. So you may find a doctor talks about your ratio, your LDL to HDL ratio. And then also we've got triglycerides. And triglycerides are the circulating fats in your blood after you've had a meal. So you're immediately broken down fats from a meal. And interestingly, if you drink alcohol regularly and you have much sugar in your diet, our bodies find that energy quicker and easier to use. And what that does is it leaves these triglycerides circulating in our blood rather than using that fat as energy. So if you do go for a cholesterol test, try to keep your sugar intake low for a few days before, and really try hard not to have any alcohol at least the day before as well, to make sure you're not getting a false high on those triglycerides. So if you did have a slightly high finger prick test at the last wellness event, I would suggest you do, when you're next with your GP, ask for a lipogram where they look at your whole blood fat ratios, and then you'll get a good idea of exactly what's going on. And if you're a very active person, you might find you've got lots of HDL cholesterol, and therefore it's slightly over 5 wouldn't be a concern. So what do we need to do in our diet in order to modify these fats within our blood? So on this diagram here, you can see we've got 3 main types of fats. You've got your saturated, your unsaturated, and then your trans fats. Saturated fats are the ones that tend to come from animal products, and they tend to be hard at room temperature. So if you think about the fat that we find on the outside of a joint of meats, on a pork chop, for example, the fat under the skin of chicken, our dairy products, particularly our hard cheeses, are going to be high in saturated fat, and also coconut oil, which is an interesting one. It is a slightly different makeup to the animal fats, but it is a saturated fat, and research has shown people with a tendency to high cholesterol, coconut oil can increase this. If, however, you're using coconut oil in replacement of an animal fat, not such a problem. So I found that coconut oil makes really nice cakes and biscuits, so if you're using that instead of butter, you're just replacing one with the other. When we're looking at unsaturated fats, I'd like you to focus on these monounsaturated, so the second line in from the left there. So we're looking at olive oil and avocados as particularly key. And then also canola oil is another one that's really affordable and a great cooking oil. And we do need to have some oils in our diet in order to digest our fat-soluble vitamins. So vitamins A, D, E, and K are particularly, they need your fat to absorb them. So a bit of salad dressing, some avocado with a salad is going to help you get all that good nutrition out. And there's an interesting experiment that you can do that just helps you to understand that process of something being fat versus water soluble. So when we chew a piece of chewing gum, just in our saliva, it doesn't go anywhere. It doesn't dissolve in our saliva and the water in our mouth. However, if you take a square of chocolate and you eat the chocolate alongside the piece of chewing gum, you'll find that chewing gum will disappear. So the fat within the chocolate will digest the chewing gum, will help to dissolve it rather. So a really nice experiment to do. It's quite a bizarre one, so you might want to give that a try sometime. Your polyunsaturated fats, we want to focus more on omega-3 fats. You've probably heard about your oily fish being high in omega-3. And then also things like chia seeds, flax seeds, and walnuts are also really good. Just be careful with your flax seeds. You need to grind them in order to get all the good stuff out. And then trans fats are fats that change during the cooking process. And often we find these in processed foods, takeaway foods, cakes, biscuits, chocolates, that type of thing. So do look out on your food labels for things that say trans fat free. That would be a really good choice. And a lot of countries are going down the road of banning trans fats completely. So we want to be really careful with our trans fats. And then the other thing you can do to help with your cholesterol is try and have a few more oats in your diet. So that might be some jungle oats for breakfast, some muesli, granola. Even if you're baking, try and add some oats in, so like an oat-based cookie or a fruit crumble with oats in the topping. And then beans and lentils, really also very beneficial for lowering cholesterol. Ooh, let's get the next slide up. Alrighty, so I've got a picture of a food label here. We're going to have a little moment. Ooh. I'll come out of my sharing and chat to you guys. Let's see if we can get this window back up. All right, am I back on full screen here?
Yes, you are on my side. Do you want to give a little bit of time to the activity and questions?
So what I'd like to do is just ask you guys, especially if you're at home or if you're at work, if you've got something in your lunchbox or in the kitchen, go and find a product, any product which has got a food label on it. So it's going to have different information on it, and particularly the table at the back. You might also want to grab a glass of water if you haven't had your water yet today. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes just to go and see if you can find something so you can have a close-up look at a food label and grab your glass of water as well. You're looking worried there. What have you got in front of you?
I've got all the sugar in the world.
What is it?
It's not for me. Can I say it's not for me? I've got a snowball. I got that from the canteen for my girls to share later on when I get back home. But yeah, I'm seeing a whole lot of sugar, carbohydrates, fat, and protein.
So what we want to think about our family diets is we should actually all be eating in a similar way. So if it's not something you would eat, then just be cautious with how you're feeding your children too. And something like a snowball, of course we can have them, but try and save those types of things for special occasions. Last day of school, birthday parties, and we'll talk about special occasion and festive eating. We have something in our house called Fun Fridays, and on a Fun Friday, we'll maybe go for a little milkshake or do something. And that means that when the little one's begging, oh no, but mummy, I really want it, you can say, okay, that's fine, but we'll save it for Fun Friday. It works really well.
Tip taken. While people are, either going to go grab a glass of water or something with the nutritional information, we have a few questions, but I'll just go with the first one for now. We have somebody who's dairy intolerant, and she's asking what she can do, what rather she should eat to get calcium.
Really good question. So a lot of the plant-based milks have got calcium fortification in them. So your almond breeze, for example, is a dairy-free milk, and that's calcium fortified. And a lot of your soya milks are also fortified with calcium. So that's one of the easiest ways to do it. Just replace your dairy milks with your plant-based milks, and you're going to get it that way.
Are they affordable? Just asking as a part two to that question. Are they still as affordable? Just asking from a financial perspective.
It does depend on which one you're buying and what brand, but if you buy them from the main supermarket, they're not too bad actually. They've become so much more popular these days that the plant-based milks have come down in price. Just be careful if you're buying from a health food type shop, then the prices can be a little bit more. Those types of shops tend to increase the price. The other thing to bear in mind is a lot of people are lactose intolerant, particularly people with African descent and Chinese as well. So I've got two products here just to show you as an example. No-Lac and Parmalat Easy Jess. These are two lactose-free milks. They do still have milk proteins. So if you are allergic to milk protein, it will be no good for you. You'd have to go for a plant-based milk. But if your symptoms are more sort of wind, bloating, and urgency to run to the bathroom, that's often the lactose that causes that. So these lactose-free milks are a really good alternative. And something like your No-Lac's also got added vitamin D, which is a nutrient a lot of us are low on. So that can work really well. So what else have we got? I saw another question there about vegetable oils. I read some scientific articles regarding potential dangers of vegetable oils at the bottom. Oh, here we go. Can cause leaky gut syndrome, cellular damage. So we want to think about which type of vegetable oil we're having. Palm oil seems to be creeping into a lot of products at the moment. Not such a great choice. Canola oil, some people worry about because it can be genetically modified, although the majority of South African canola oil is not GM. So look for a GM-free canola oil and try and go for more of your monounsaturated than your polyunsaturated. So that's why we're going to go canola or olive oil as opposed to your sunflower and your vegetable oils. And the reason is your omega-3s help to reduce inflammation. And with your gut health, we want to try and reduce inflammation as well. So stick with your high and monounsaturated fats and you should be okay there. Banting does not recommend vegetable oils, rather coconut oil, butter, olive oil, etc. Nothing from seeds. Some of the Banting recommendations have been changing over time. Certainly the Real Meal Revolution information is still early in its days of research. So you'll find that some of the stuff that came out originally has changed, and a lot of the research around coconut oil has also changed. So it became very popular to add a lot of extra coconut oil into things. So yes, use your coconut oil instead of other fats, but be careful not to have a lot of it. So too much saturated fat is not going to be great. Olive oil, really good choice. We can see from population studies that's going to be a great choice for you. Let's see what else. There's just so much information out there. It is really confusing. Definitely confusing. So what I do as a dietitian is I will look at the research and see how big the studies are. And the problem with the media is often they'll jump onto a small study before they've really got the proper research, and that's where it becomes so confusing. So as I said, that's this coconut oil thing. All of a sudden the shops started stocking it, and every adding extra coconut oil into everything a couple of years ago, and it became popular culture to do it. So we need to be careful where we're getting that information from, and that's why we're doing a session like this today, and I really appreciate your questions, and hopefully we can sort of get to the bottom of some of the science and help you make sense of it all. And also remembering, if you're having something occasionally, it's not going to make a big deal, but we're wanting to make sure that the majority of your food choices are going to be correct. Alrighty. Blood type eating, I think that's going to be a whole other topic, but generally the blood type diet does not have any science backing. There are reasons it works for some people, but it is not got any scientific basis at all. Okay. Vegetable oils is on both. Yep. So your vegetable oils can be changed into a trans fat. So we can see the vegetable oils are on polyunsaturated fats and trans fats, and it depends how it's been heated up. So something like a sunflower oil, for example, is a polyunsaturated fat. But when it's heated to a certain temperature, the double bonds change, and that can make it into a trans fat. So yes, you're absolutely right. It comes into both of those. It can be a straightforward polyunsaturated, or during the cooking process becomes a trans fat. Alrighty. So let's, I think I'm going to switch back onto our food label. Hopefully you guys are all with us. Let's switch back there and carry on with the presentation. We're doing well for time so far. All right, I'm going to bring my Weet-Bix up. This is just an example of a label, not something I'm necessarily recommending you choose to eat. So you should still be able to hear and see me. If you can't, jot something in the chat. Occasionally I went missing yesterday. All right, so something I'd like to draw your attention to first of all is that round circle with the heart and the knife and fork. This is our Heart and Stroke Foundation logo. If you're rushing for time and you want a quick indicator whether something's a good choice, the Heart and Stroke Foundation logo and also the Diabetes South Africa logo are really great ones to look for. The diabetes one is like a round circle with two half blue semicircles. So not every food which fits their criteria will have the logo. People have to pay in order to get that logo onto their product. The other useful thing with it is you can use those products as a guideline. So rather than remembering all the numbers for how much sugar is a good idea and how much salt, you can pick up a product with that logo on it and then compare it to another product and say, okay, is it roughly in the same region, or is this product a lot higher than that one? So it gives you a nice reference point. And a real quick, easy front of pack option as well. So on the majority of products on the back of the packet, you'll find this sort of table with your different nutrients in it. It can be really confusing, and you're certainly not going to be able to look at all of these numbers every time you shop on every product. So after a session like this, it's nice to see if you've got a little bit of time, take an extra half an hour in the supermarket and just pick up some products that you normally buy and compare with them with some other products and get an idea if you feel you're happy with your choices or if you feel there's a different choice you could make for you. So at the top there, we've got your energy. Energy is going to be important in two ways. If you're trying to modify your weight, whether you're trying to increase or decrease your weight, you're going to look at your energy. So for somebody who's trying to lose weight, whether that energy is coming from carbohydrates, fats, or proteins, it doesn't actually matter too much. A little bit, but not too much. Total energy is what's most important. So for example, if we were comparing two different pots of yogurt, we would go with per serving because we know we're going to eat that whole pot. If you're comparing something where the portion sizes might change slightly, then you can compare per 100 grams. If you're trying to reduce your weight, we're going to look for the options with the lower energy levels. If you're trying to bulk up, then maybe you've not been well recently, you've lost weight, maybe you're trying to increase your weight for sport or activity, then you can look for products with slightly more energy. Okay, second one on the list there, we've got your protein. Protein is the building blocks of our muscles, helps growth and repair. Generally speaking, we're looking at 1 gram of protein per kilogram body weight. So for example, if you weighed 70 kilograms, you're looking at around 70 grams of protein per day. If you're following a vegetarian or vegan eating pattern, then we normally bump it up slightly to about 1.2 grams per kilogram, just because the protein's not quite so easily digestible. And then if you're sporty, we push it up to maybe 1.5. Very rarely for professional sportsmen do we increase it more than that. So a lot of people do take protein supplements. And generally speaking, if you're doing sport, you need not only more protein, but more of all your nutrition, your micronutrients, your fats as well. So I wouldn't necessarily recommend a protein supplement on its own, but more getting more food in general. Next one down, we've got carbohydrates. So carbohydrates are your starchy foods, your bread, pasta, potato, rice, mealy meal. And then also your sugary foods. So starchy carbohydrates are broken down into individual sugars through digestion. And here's some chit chat there. Are we all good? And then also you've got your fruit sugars as well. And your milk sugars. So we'll find things like a yogurt with no added sugar has still got sugar in it because of the lactose, the milk sugar. Fruits have got sugar as well. And what we want to focus on is any added sugar in a product, and that's the one that tends to be detrimental for our health. And you can also look at the ingredients listing and see, is sugar high up on the ingredients, or does it come towards the end of the list? And the ingredients are always listed with the biggest ingredient first, going down in order. So you can get an idea as to what's in a product from looking at that ingredients order as well. Then fats, we chatted about trying to increase your monounsaturated fats. And this is particularly key if you're looking at things like margarines and butters. We can look at that. And then also you can look at your trans fats. Some of those old-fashioned brick margarines were very high in trans fats, which gave margarines a particularly bad press. Some of the newer versions of margarines are high in monounsaturated fats and low in trans fats. And all they are is an emulsified oil. People who don't like margarines sometimes will do things like freeze their olive oil, and then you can spread that. That works quite well as well. So there's different ways you can go with what you feel comfortable with, and you can sort of adjust accordingly. Dietary fiber, we want to try and increase the amount of fiber in our diet as much as we can. And then lower down, we can see your micronutrients. And the nice thing to look at here is your percentage RDA. Sometimes it'll be percentage NRV, nutrient reference value. And this tells us the amount for the average adult that we need to have in a day. Obviously, it's not specific to you, but it gives you a good idea. So we can see, for example, this particular cereal's got 25% or a quarter of your intake of B1, B2, niacin, and iron. So this can be a nice thing to look out for, especially if you struggle to get a nice varied diet, or you feel you do miss out on a food group. You might want to choose something that's been fortified, and you can have a look at this percentage RDA. Equally, if you're looking at a multivitamin supplement or any sort of supplement, you'll also find your percentage RDA on those packages as well. And you want to aim for a supplement which is around 100% of your RDA. Generally not more than that unless you've got medical go-ahead to do that. So 100% of RDA for your supplements, vitamins and minerals and that type of thing. All right, let's have a look at our plants. Plant-based eating, really popular at the moment. It's sort of flip-flopped between your Banting diet, and now everyone's going vegan and vegetarian. But if we look at those two diets, generally we want to eat more plants. It's sustainable for the planet, it's really good for us. And one of the main reasons is to do with our microbiome, which is our friendly bacteria and the relationship of friendly bacteria in our guts and on our skin. So you might have been given a probiotic at some point in your life, especially if you've taken an antibiotic at any point, just to replenish those friendly bacteria. Some people with irritable bowel syndrome find that they've got a disordered probiotics within their gut, so they've got more of the bad ones and less of the good ones. And in order to encourage the right ones, we need to feed them the right food. And we call this food for the beneficial bacteria prebiotics. And the combination between them can sometimes be called symbiotics. So your prebiotics, things like artichokes, onions and garlic, asparagus, leeks, wheat bran, raw bananas, barley, oats, and flax seeds. Those ones are particularly good. But all your plant-based foods are going to give you a nice amount of fiber, which is going to try and keep those friendly bacteria nice and happy. Here again, stop the screen share. I'm going to go through that magic number 30. So on that last slide, it talked about number 30 with our plant-based foods. So we know the gut microbiome is good for our gut health, preventing leaky gut, IBS, that type of thing. It's also been linked to mental health, so reducing depression and anxiety. So doing things like gardening, getting your hands in the soil with all those friendly bacteria can also really help to get those right amount of bacteria in. So what I want you to do is think about how close you might be to getting 30 different plant-based foods per week. And there was a fairly recent study which showed that people who were closest to 30 had the best range of friendly bacteria in their guts compared with people with a smaller range. So we can only count each vegetable or plant-based food once, even if you eat it in a different form. So for example, I've got some tomato-based passata here. It's a nice product, this one. It really is just mashed up tomatoes. If you eat tin tomatoes, baby tomatoes, sliced tomatoes, we're going to count tomatoes once. So one of the most obvious plant-based foods is our vegetables. So we've got tomatoes. I've got an onion here. We know that's a good prebiotic. Salad-based vegetables like cucumber, some carrots. I've got a cabbage here. A particularly favorite of mine is to just shred up the cabbage and the carrots and make a homemade coleslaw. If you're watching your weight, you can use something like a full cream yogurt instead of just mayonnaise. And although it says full cream, we're going to use that label. Interestingly, full cream yogurt's only about 6% fat, whereas your mayonnaise is probably going to be closer to 30% fat. So we want to be careful with those labels and just turn it over and do a bit of investigation to help us. Things like peppers are really great. I wish I had a yellow one. I've already eaten it. Yellow peppers, really high in vitamin C as well. And beetroots are one of my favorites as well. Really cost-effective vegetable. It lasts for a long time in the fridge. So if you're someone who does your shopping once a month, thinking about those root vegetables which do last and they're going to last you through. Also doing things like roasting or pickling your beetroots so they're going to last a little bit longer. Also got a sweet potato here. I'm just going to cut it in half for you guys so you can see inside. Often our sweet potatoes are those purple-skinned ones with the white flesh. The orange flesh is particularly high in vitamin A, a great antioxidant, really good at fighting disease as well. So try and go for your orange-fleshed ones if you can find them, often called jewel sweet potatoes. And when we're thinking about our portion sizes, if you're thinking about a leafy vegetable like a spinach, a kale, a salad, rocket, cabbage, we're looking at about a cup being a serving size. And then if you're going to chop up your fruits or vegetables or a whole fruit, like a whole apple, we're looking at half a cup or roughly a handful. So I've got some strawberries here as well. Also got some juice. Small glass of juice would count as a serving size, so about 100 mils. And ideally, we don't want to get a lot of our energy from juice because it is quite high in sugar compared with having a whole fruit. Other fruits we've got over here, we've got some bananas, nachi, apple. Nectarines seem to be in season at the moment. They're really good value. So the foods which we can get locally and in season will have more nutrients in them. The more a fruit or vegetable is stored, the more the vitamins reduce in that product. So trying to get nice fresh stuff. If you can't get fresh, that's where the tinning and the freezing comes in. It helps to lock in all the nutrition. So let's go across to the freezer and just see what I've got in my freezer today. Staples in my house are normally frozen peas and frozen sweet corn. My daughter's very lazy to eat the corn off the cob, so I buy the frozen. It's real quick, easy, midweek vegetable, and also great if I haven't made it to the shops. You know, life happens, it catches up with us, especially at this time of year. Keep some frozen things in the freezer. You know it's going to be there, and you've got it easy to hand. And then you have tinned products as well. So beans and lentils are also going to count as your plant-based foods towards your 30. Tinned lentils are a really great way of reducing your meat intake. So making something like a minced dish, like a minced curry, a spaghetti bolognese, add some lentils in. You'll hardly notice them, but it's going to reduce the energy, increase the fiber, give you a really good nutrient profile. So we've got fruits and veggies. You can also count other dried products. So I've got some soup mix here. It's got barley, it's got lentils and split peas in it. Super affordable, really nutritious. We can see again our Heart Foundation logo. It tells us it's low GI, it's cholesterol free, it's a source of fiber. It's a great vegetarian option. You can make it into like a risotto, which is also nice. So instead of just a rice dish, you can eat it on its own, make it up with a stock, put it in soups and stews. And again, it's going to bulk out your meals. So it's one of those great towards the end of the month, the budget's getting tight, sitting in the cupboard, you can add it in and bulk things up. Really good source of nutrition. Nuts and seeds. Sunflower seeds are a staple for me. I'm allergic to nuts myself, so I don't eat nuts, but I do like to include some seeds. And sunflower seeds are super nutritious and a lot more affordable than nuts. Got lots of micronutrients, things like zinc and selenium in there as well. And I might share a recipe with you for chocolate bark, where you melt your chocolate and mix the seeds in with it, and it makes a really nice naughty treat, a lot less guilty than just the chocolate on its own, because you know you've put some goodness in there too, and also a good source of iron. So challenge for you all is to go around your kitchens when you get home, see what you've got in the cupboards, and try and see if you can count up 30 different plant-based foods. So fresh fruits and vegetables. We've got dried, we've got tinned, we've got frozen, and then you can count your nuts, your seeds, and your grains as well. So you can count oats as one, you can count rice as one, ordinary potatoes would count. I'm thinking about our dried fruits. I've got 2 little pear halves here. If you're somebody who enjoys your dried fruit, just watch your serving size. All they've done is shrunk it by drying it, still got the same amount of sugar in it. So 2 pear halves would have been 1 pear, so that's one serving size for you. I'm a shocker. Give me that dried mango and it disappears very fast if I'm not careful. So you might also want to just think about the portion sizes of things you're purchasing. Do you go for that big pack because it's cheaper? Or do you choose a smaller pack and it's going to help you to control your portions? Same with things like chips. Can't have a big packet of chips in my house. It goes too fast. So I tend to buy the strips of chips or the small ones, and that way it's much easier to control. All right, let's switch back onto the slides. Where have we gone? PowerPoint, here we go. We've got about 10 minutes left, so I'm going to whiz through some slides about your food and your mood, and then we'll go on to festive eating, and we've got time for a few more questions as well. So these slides are going to go big for us. There we go. So our mood can affect the food choices we make, but equally the food choices we make can also affect how we feel. So have any of you found yourselves comfort eating during this period of COVID? Things have been very different, especially if you're at home and you've got access to food, or perhaps you've got a canteen at work where you can go buy snowballs, and if you are not feeling so great, you might find yourself going for those. Often it's the sweet carbohydrate foods that we go for. And I've written down here, boost your hug hormone, your serotonin. Serotonin does tend to increase when we have carbohydrate and sweet foods in particular. So it's very likely when you're feeling down and you have one of those foods, it will give you a little pick-me-up. The other problem we've got, when we feel tired, our bodies get a little bit confused. It might be that we haven't been sleeping well. It might even be that we're thirsty and we're dehydrated and we feel a bit tired and lethargic. And we go for those sweet foods because we feel we need that energy and that little lift. So just be aware. I want you to think to yourself, do I need to eat or do I want to eat? When you go for something tasty to make yourself feel a little bit better. If you've just had a meal, it might be that you think, actually, no, I can't be hungry. I have just eaten. Maybe it's just that I fancy something to eat. It might be the opposite. It might be that you're actually starving. You've been in meetings the whole day. You've been busy with deadlines and you're actually really hungry. In which case, be careful for going for that quick, easy snack, that feel-good snack. Rather try and put together a quick balanced meal, which actually will make you feel a lot better. When we're extremely hungry and we eat fast, what can happen is we overeat. Our stomachs expand, and that's when you then feel tired and lethargic again after lunch. So thinking about your comfort eating, ask yourself, do I need to eat or do I want to eat? Is there something you can do to distract yourself? Give yourself 5 minutes. if you don't think that you actually are hungry. Go outside, get some fresh air. If you're at home, try and distract yourself with something else, pick up the phone, chat to a colleague, have an offload to somebody, whatever it might be that's stressing you out, try and do something to just calm yourself. If you're someone who's into prayer or meditation, then just take a few moments to yourself, just to sort of calm yourself down. If you're still hungry, absolutely fine, go find something to eat, but you'll find yourself making a better choice at that point. Deficiencies can lead to alterations in your mood. Anxiety and depression is much higher if you've got a B12 deficiency. B12 is directly linked to our neurological health. And B12 is something which comes from animal products. So if you've reduced your animal product intake, you're not getting meat, dairy, fish, it might be something you need to look at. If you're on a strict vegan diet, it's definitely something you would need to supplement. You won't be able to get enough from a strict vegan diet without a supplementation. Iron, if you're anemic, and particularly the ladies out there, anemia is more common in women than men. If you're anemic, you will feel more tired and lethargic, and it might mean that you're more likely to comfort eat. So you might again need a supplement, or looking at your iron-rich foods, your red meats, and then also things like your green leafy vegetables combined with some vitamin C. So some strawberries after a meal, or some yellow pepper chopped into a salad, maybe a little glass of fruit juice with your meal to help absorb that iron. Vitamin D is another one I want to just really highlight. With COVID around, vitamin D has been shown to reduce the severity of COVID and also increase the speed at which you recover. So vitamin D is our sunlight vitamin. It's the one we produce in our skin. You will find it fortified in some margarines, also in that milk that I mentioned earlier. But it's a nice thing to do if you feel you're getting stressed, you're comfort eating, try and go outside, get some sunlight on your skin. It's going to be a win-win. Relax yourself down, get a little bit of vitamin D. It might just help. I'm going to skip through that one and let's go on to holidays and celebrations. So, festive season is coming up. We've just had Diwali recently. It might be that you've had your own celebrations already. Some of you might be looking forward to a break from work, holiday season. You might be celebrating Christmas. And it's a time when we can end up feeling a little bit guilty about our food choices. I hear people using expressions like, oh, I've fallen off the wagon, or I haven't been following my diet, or whatever it might be. So let's remember the role of food. It's not just about getting our vitamins and minerals. Food is part of belonging, it's culture, it's sharing, it's an identity within our families. So it's really, really important that we don't think of food as just nutrition, but we think of it as part of who we are. I mean, it's something that we look back in history and it defines different people and different events, and it helps us to celebrate. So really there are no right or wrong foods. It is about eating the better things most of the time. So what we want to do is try and be careful with how long that holiday period becomes. Is the festive season going to last the whole months of December and January, or is it just going to be a week or 2 weeks? How often are you socializing? And that's going to be very individual for all of us as to how we manage these situations. If I know I'm going to go out for dinner and it's probably not going to be the best choice, I know buffets are often really tricky, lots of fried foods, not so many healthy choices. Maybe have a little salad before you go out, so you're not starving hungry and you know you've had your vegetables already. If it is a buffet scenario, try and choose just one plate of food. You can see what you've got. If you keep going back and picking at things, you'll have absolutely no idea how much you've had to eat. It's much harder to monitor. So if you're able to grab a plate, put everything on there and see what you've got, you'll be able to make a more educated, mindful choice as to what you're going to do. Include some lower energy fruits and vegetables. This is going to create some bulk on your plate as well. So on this example, there's some red cabbage, some carrots, some Brussels sprouts. Choose something that you enjoy. And then one of my favorite tips, and I often give it to people with diabetes as well, especially around festivities and celebrations, is swap out your carbohydrates. So our sugary foods are also carbohydrate. So instead of having potatoes or rice or pasta or bread with a meal, you can cut that out completely. Focus on your protein and your vegetables, and then save that carbohydrate for your pudding. So whether that's a pavlova or some Christmas cake, whatever pudding's on offer. You're going to then feel less guilty about having that sweet treat afterwards, because you know you've had it instead of your carbohydrates. If you're somebody who finds yourself invited to a lot of celebrations at this time of year, then that's going to work really well. Try and really cut down your carbohydrates. We know that for most people, about 50% of our energy comes from these foods. And you can also cut your carbohydrates down at other meals throughout the day as well. It's going to help to reduce that energy intake. The keys to success, we're looking for sustainable long-term commitment, something that's practical and realistic for your pocket and also for your whole family. We don't want to be encouraging you to cook different meals for different people within the household. Try and grow your food knowledge as much as possible to grow your confidence. Balance your intake across the week. You might find that one meal is not perfect, but actually across the whole week you're pretty good. Monitor what you're doing, but not too often. So you might want to step on the scales now and then to see how you're doing. You might want to use one of these apps where you can count your calories and your intake and see exactly what you're doing, or keep a food diary. I wouldn't recommend you do that all the time, but certainly a snapshot is a really good way of reflecting on how you're getting on. Be active most days, and then seek support. So support can be from a professional, but equally friends and family can also provide support. So when it comes to making changes, the research has shown that people who have a buddy to make changes do much, much better and maintain those changes. So maybe there's somebody at work you can buddy up with, making better choices in the work environment, somebody at home, a friend you can phone regularly. And that regular support is really, really helpful. I've certainly found with my clients, I now offer them a quick 10-minute follow-up session for my regulars, and that regular support has made a huge difference rather than a once-off session with them. So if you're needing some more support in a more professional way, you've got your T4U system set up, and that might be for all sorts of different scenarios, and health coaching is certainly one of them. And you can access a dietitian through the T4U program. So if there's a specific dietary need that you would like some more information on, then you can give them a shout, and we've got the number here for you. So you can call 0860 086 092. There's also an SMS number there, 32341. You can drop them an email, you can look on the website. So do seek support, and it is confusing. There's so much conflicting information out there. The most important thing is that you work out what is right for you as an individual, for your budget, for your family, for your culture, for your health conditions, and you reflect on what's working. And if you're feeling well and your markers, your cholesterol, your blood pressure, your sugars are all good, waist circumference is in a good place, then you're probably on track. If you're not feeling well, you're not feeling your body's in the right place, then seek some support and just try and tweak things to work out what might work better for you. Alrighty.
Cool. Is that you?
That is me. I'm open to questions. Let me open my little comments tab.
We do have. I'll quickly just read them for you while you're switching. So we had one about low hemoglobin levels, and what foods can be eaten to balance those. And then we also have one about sugar content in tinned foods. Isn't it quite high? What's the deal with that? And then the last one that just come through was from Rudy in terms of how healthy or unhealthy are healthier drinks or diet drinks like Diet Coke and so forth.
Okay, so we did touch on the anemia. The low hemoglobin is normally caused through low iron. B12 can also influence it. So generally speaking, it's our animal foods. Our red meat is going to be one of the highest iron levels. Things like liver, also a really good source. If you're not eating those foods, it's your green leafy vegetables. Things like kale and broccoli are particularly good. We find spinach, the iron isn't absorbed quite as well as it is in kale. And then for your vegetarian sources of iron, the key thing is you pair it up with vitamin C. So vitamin C is your citrus-based fruits, kiwi fruits, strawberries, yellow peppers. Often the easiest thing to do if you've got low iron is have a small glass of fruit juice with your main meal of the day, and that's going to help you to absorb that iron. Similar question came up yesterday, so I'm going to write a list of iron-rich foods in the information I send out. Then diet drinks, really awesome question. So we all know that too much sugar is not a great choice. If we're burning up that sugar, not a problem. So if you're having a regular drink after you've done some physical activity, for example, in the Comrades Marathon, they hand out Coke throughout the race. We're using that sugar, we need to use it up. The diet drinks have got artificial sweeteners in them. And some people do have concerns about artificial sweeteners. However, if you're not having them very often, it's not a problem. So I wouldn't recommend you have diet drinks every single day, but they're not a problem if you're having them occasionally. The studies do show that probably 1 can of a diet drink every day would be okay, but I think we want to be cautious and just limit those types of things. We also know that things like Coke demineralizes our bones. So even a Diet Coke is very acidic. It's not great for bone health. So rather go for a glass of water. Tea or coffee would actually be okay. So 3 cups of coffee a day has been shown to be beneficial. There's really good antioxidants in coffee. So don't feel guilty about your coffee, but don't again go over the top and have 6 cups in a day. We want to just keep it a little bit lower. And then what was that other? I missed one.
The other one was the sugar content in tinned foods.
Oh, tinned food, yes, very good question. Now let me just see if this one hasn't. Some baked beans have actually got the diabetes logo on them. So this is a really good example of something with sugar. Let's see how much sugar would be in a serving. 17 grams of sugar in a whole tin of baked beans. So that is quite a lot. So the sauce has got some sugar in, and the beans have also got some sugar. However, because the beans are so high in fiber, your body doesn't absorb that sugar very quickly. Mm-hmm. So there's something called glycemic load, which is a little bit more complicated, but it's the ratio between the quickly absorbed carbohydrates and how much you have. So watermelon's a really good example of this. Watermelon is actually absorbed very quickly, but it doesn't have very much sugar. And that would be the opposite to something like baked beans, which has the sugar, but it's absorbed slowly. So really not a problem at all. Even for somebody with diabetes, I would say you can have some baked beans. Just watch your portion size and then watch how much carbohydrate you double up on. So baked beans are high in carbohydrate. We don't want to necessarily just have baked beans on toast if we're diabetic or watching our weight. Maybe swap out one of those slices of toast for an egg instead, which has got no carbohydrates in it. So it's about, no food is a bad food, but how much are we having and what are we combining it with? And that's going to have the biggest impact.
Okay.
Does caffeine hamper the absorption of iron, vitamin C combo? Good question. Not the caffeine as such, it's the tannins. Tannins we find in tea and coffee, and they can hamper the absorption of iron. So best not to have it with your main meal of the day. Tea is particularly bad, much worse than coffee. Rooibos tea, not a problem. Rooibos tea's got no tannins in it. Tannins and oxalates are the 2 things which hamper the absorption of iron. And that's one of the reasons spinach, the iron from spinach isn't easily absorbed because it's got oxalates in it. So the way we combine our food is really key.
Just one last question. I know we're like 4 minutes over. Just one last question from Sam. She's asking, whether to have full cream or low fat / fat-free in terms of dairy if you're trying to lose weight. Is that a good option?
So your full cream milk's about 4% fat. Your low fat's about 2% fat, and your fat-free is obviously fat-free. Depends how often you're having it. If you're somebody who has breakfast cereal in the morning and lots of cups of tea and coffee in the day with lots of milk in them, lattes, that type of thing, then yes, that reduced fat would make a difference for you. If you're only using a small amount of milk, then it's not going to have a huge impact. Remember, it's only 4% fat in full cream milk. Something to be a low-fat product, we would actually say is anything less than 5% fat. So although it's called full cream milk, it's actually not a high-fat product. So again, have a look at those labels and compare, and think about how often you have something. If it's a food that you really eat a lot of, then making a small change is going to have a big impact. It's like people who put sugar in their tea and coffee. Maybe they only have 1 or 2 cups of tea a day with 1 teaspoon of sugar. Cutting that teaspoon of sugar is not really going to make a huge difference for that person. However, if you have 3 teaspoons and you're drinking 5 or 6 cups of hot drink a day, then it's going to have a big impact. So it's such an individual thing, your dietary choices. So reflect on what your goals are, where you're at now, and then if you need some more support, then contact the T4U hotline. I'm going to do some Q&As, send you guys out a recipe collection as well, and maybe we can do another session in the new year just to get everyone started for 2022.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. Natalie,
Yeah.
I feel like there's stuff that I didn't quite clearly get in our drive yesterday, and the questions from everybody else is also helping, to think about so much more. So thank you so much for the session. Thank you to everybody who also joined us. Please do keep your questions coming. As Natalie has said, she will be doing a little Q&A in case something was missed, so you can refer back to that when we do share it. Natalie, thank you again. I think it's always so informative sitting through these sessions. I think it's beautiful the fact that they're not only for us at TASAS, but you can take this information and share it with a friend or family or whoever you want to share it with. So that's the really beautiful part for me. And the fact that people got to ask questions that were specific to them or their loved ones as well really helped. Thank you very much for giving us an extra 7 minutes of your time, everyone. Always a pleasure hosting you. Please do look